The Behind the Book lecture series is made possible by World eBook Library, the world's largest database of portable ebooks for academic research, and the World Heritage Encyclopedia, the world's knowledge at your fingertips.
You're one person on an island. You get to be king of the world. What would you do? Is there a noble form of colonization? This novel, in some sense, puts it right in your face and forces you to struggle with that question.
British author Daniel Defoe. He was born around 1660. Defoe came of age in what is called the Age of Enlightenment, where all sorts of classical ideas and thinking and institutions were being questioned. It was an age of tremendous international colonialism, the explosion of new sorts of wealth. It was an age of the slave trade. It was an age of, one might say, a new kind of man who, for the first time in history, had the option of defining himself.
At this time, there's a lot of unrest, tension between the monarchy, the king, and parliament. There's tension between the king and the people, tension between the king and people that he wants to be his subjects, other parts of Great Britain that aren't part of Great Britain yet. And so a lot of his writing is speaking to one of these tensions, right? He's writing articles for the English in favor of something, or he's writing arguments in favor of the people against the king. So he had written some pamphlet that it was supposed to be anonymous, but he was identified. He was arrested by Queen Anne for writing seditious libel and was put in the pillories. And people were supposed to come up and throw offensive objects at him, things that were smelly, things that were painful. But they say that people came up and threw roses at him.
He joined the Monmouth Rebellion against the unpopular King James II and was actually thrown in prison afterwards.
He was kind of recognized as a voice for the people at that time. But later on in his life, he was kind of a voice for the man, like he spoke out for the government interest.
He was a super prolific writer. Some say he is credited with somewhere around 550 different publications of pamphlets and books, sort of the Stephen King of his day. He was coming out with something new every month, but he is most famous for his iconic tale of adventure, Robinson Crusoe.
Robinson Crusoe and all his famous kind of travel logs is really the first of their kind. On the one hand, he wrote it, I think, just to write something that would be popular.
It was the New York Times #1 bestseller of his time.
And I think he was experimenting with the novel form. How can we tell a story? In fact, when it was first published, it looked like the author was Robinson Crusoe. So people thought it was an autobiography. The type of story where you could put yourself into the character's shoes and kind of live the story with the character, it was mind-blowing. It was ridiculously popular. Within less than a year, they had to do 4 editions of Robinson Crusoe.
Everybody understands the novel Robinson Crusoe to be a story about adventure. This fellow Robinson Crusoe set sail, went to sea, against the wishes of his parents, and had a rather dubious seafaring career. By the time Robinson gets shipwrecked and cast upon an isolated island, he has in fact gone through 3 different shipwrecks previously in the tale. It's a story of tremendous individual overcoming. You see Robinson cast ashore on a deserted island. He has to figure out how to survive. how to feed himself. You see him build a mini civilization. He raises goats, he builds a shelter, he becomes a hunter and fisherman. Eventually, he makes friends from a cannibalistic tribe.
Defoe, he had certain, I think, moral beliefs about the superiority of the British people and culture and the superiority of Christianity. Defoe was smart in picking, for example, the practice of cannibalism. Cannibalism has such a strong kind of moral reaction that if you can show that these people are practicing cannibalism, he really tips the scale much more on the side of the colonists. Because who would say cannibalism is a good idea? Stopping cannibalism, we must be doing a good job. But what Defoe doesn't explore as much are all the other types of, I think, indigenous values and practices that Crusoe is also obliterating by basically reforming Friday and his small clan. Defoe, I think, addresses the issue of slavery in the character of Robinson Crusoe in much the way that I think the English people were coming around to. If you think about the time that this book was written, the thinking, I think, in this colonialism of just, there's nothing wrong with having slaves and servants. In fact, for the character of Robinson Crusoe, it's a big advancement. He finally gets a servant, and it's an advancement of his life on the island. And in some sense, it's a slave, because he's not paying Friday, but he's rescued him from being killed by other natives and other savages. When you hear that now, it sounds ridiculous. But I actually think at the time he wrote it, that was a genuine sentiment. On the one hand, Crusoe has really good intentions. He chooses to save Friday's life. He chooses to teach him how to read. But then on the other hand, clearly keeps Friday subservient. The allegory in some sense was, one, we are doing our moral duty to help improve these people. Two, we know what's best. But he was trying to present a case for, in some sense, cultural imperialism. And I think the story of Crusoe and Friday is the story of English colonization. He kind of glosses over or ignores all the ugly parts of colonization, and he focuses just on the redeeming aspects of colonization. In his novel is really presenting the supremacy of, in some sense, a society that has writing. So in contrast to the natives of Australia or South Africa or the Americas, this is close to when Captain Cook discovered Hawaii, right? What makes Crusoe a civilized man is his ability to read and his ability to write, the fact that he could keep a log and record what was happening. He still kept track of the days of the week, right? He names Friday because that's the day that he saved him. All of these other, cultures and society, they don't have writing yet. How could they have anything worth teaching us if they don't have any writing? And that kind of arrogance and the assumption that, you really need writing in order to have wisdom, I think is very strongly represented in Robinson Crusoe. When you read Robinson Crusoe, you're really getting a glimpse into the thinking of that time and the mindset of that time. It's not just the story of Robinson Crusoe and his adventure, this is what people thought at that time. And so in some sense, it gives you a better understanding of history because it is such a well-written work of realistic fiction.
One of the questions of Defoe's lifetime, of his age, was, well, how does a man define himself? How does a person make his way in an age where there are so many new vistas?
Most of the people in England and the United Kingdom at that time are still relatively poor. I think people are reading this and thinking, hey, we can go to a foreign land and make things work. I'm gonna go and make my fortune. The sense of adventure and being your own self-made man.
More than anything else though, Robinson Crusoe, it's a story about the development of an individual. Robinson Crusoe remains powerful today because it is an intense psychological drama.
The whole theme of the castaway, all these people just playing off the theme of the castaway up until, like, you know, Gilligan's Island, right? Gilligan's Island is popular because we are fascinated with this idea that you could put somebody into a completely foreign environment and they would make it work. The Tom Hanks movie, Castaway, take an average, normal guy, put him on an island in the middle of nowhere, and let's just watch how the human will perseveres and survives. You're in the shipwreck with him, you're on the island with him, you're discovering all these things. When he all of a sudden figures out how he's gonna eat, you feel the joy of, like, I'm not gonna starve to death. And I think that's why it's continued to be relevant even today, is that complexity.